stories told by guys named Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. But perhaps there's a place that also makes room to hear about God's continuing testament in your life too. Maybe there's a people who stand ready to welcome you with radical hospitality, no matter who you are or where you are on life's journey. Maybe there's a church that reaches out to their neighbors and communities with one goal in mind. If you're not comfortable placing periods where God has placed a comma instead, if you find yourself listening for the language of God in those out-of-the-ordinary experiences, then maybe we ought to spend more time together. If the moment for religion with relevance has arrived, then perhaps we should be talking and listening to each other. How we might invest our lives, our energy, and our money so that it might just be so. We're not perfect, but we know who we are and what we're about. We're the God is Still Speaking Church. Our faith is 2,000 years old. Our thinking is not. We're the United Church of Christ, where God is still speaking.
Good morning, United Church of Christ. Now we get to exercise a little bit different part of our body. First our ears and then our mouths. So we are going to share some information with you, share what we've been working on as your officers of the church, and we are going to have an opportunity for you to have a dialogue at your tables or in the areas where you're seated after we've given our report, and then we're going to hear the presentation of our general minister and president. Most of us who attend the General Synod do so because we love our church, the United Church of Christ. We believe in its mission, we value our approach to ministry, we are committed to the unique gifts that the UCC brings to the ecumenical interfaith community, and we love our local congregations. But even though we feel passionate about our church, we sometimes struggle with that common language. How do we readily define who we are? The overarching core values that make us unique in the marketplace of diverse religious viewpoints, that which sets us apart as distinctive. When we use the word distinctive to talk about UCC values, that doesn't mean that we are the only church that possesses these particular characteristics. But being distinctive does make us recognizable, and sometimes does distinguish you from someone else. For example, if you see someone who's tall, has dark hair, and wearing a red shirt, of course, they are distinctive, but not because of these individuals' traits are rare and unique. This makes them recognizable to others. This is the type of distinctiveness that we're talking about. For the United Church of Christ, it doesn't feel natural for us to talk this way. As a church founded and rooted in the language of united and uniting, talking about our distinctiveness is not always comfortable or easy, but it's something we really need to get over and get to peace with. Because in evangelism, in outreach, in fundraising, the distinctiveness of the United Church of Christ does matter. We heard it this morning in the Speak Out, because people want to know if this is a church that resonates with their own values. This is why a potential member or donor will join or attend or give to our church instead of the multiple other entities that are worthy of their time and their dollars, because the distinctiveness of the UCC speaks to them. During the last 2 years, we, the Collegium of Officers, after much conversation and testing with our respective boards, the Executive Council, Conference Ministers, and the Mission Planning Council, we've worked on articulating what we feel are the core values of the United Church of Christ, the unique combination of beliefs and traits that set us apart as uniquely UCC. I hope you'll agree that it's not sufficient or even helpful to reduce church values to competing dualism, things like using descriptions like, are we liberal or conservative? Or are we mainline or evangelical? Or are we closed or open-minded? These are oversimplified terms. They're limiting and only invite debate. So instead of relying on divisive terms or trying to invent new ones, we turn to the language of our Still Speaking God movement. We turn to our language of the God is still speaking to inform and inspire us. Why reinvent the wheel, right? Still Speaking has it produced more than just a common look or feel or brand for the United Church of Christ. It has provided a common language and understanding of who we see ourselves to be. It has given us that theological context, a compelling message, and is true to who we have been and who we are, and who we aspire to be, and who God is calling us to be in this time. So it's authentic. And when we talk about our core values, being true to ourselves and authentic is essential. So therefore, our case for support is clear and simple. It's also accurate. It speaks to not only what we hope to be, but who we have been for centuries. Who are we? We are the United Church of Christ, where God is still speaking. We are the United Church of Christ, where God is still speaking. And because God is still speaking, we are a church that is distinctive because of our emphasis on three things: continuing testament, extravagant welcome, and changing lives.
The first of these distinctive traits that we would like to underscore for you today is the United Church of Christ's belief in continuing testament. Continuing testament is best summed up this way: our faith is 2,000 years old, our thinking is not. God is still speaking. Because we believe in continuing testament, that is why we are committed to and we remain open to hearing God's ancient story anew and afresh. It's evidenced in our Still Speaking daily devotional that reaches more than 30,000 people every single morning by email or by Facebook. It's visible in the work of our UCC seminaries, at our Leaders in Koinonia events, and in the weekly Seeds and Worship Ways resources, which all help us to explore how God's continuing testament is not etched in tablets forever, but written on our hearts. It's why in 2010, we released Faith Practices, an expansive online library of resources and activities designed to help UCC local churches explore various practices of faith, from keeping Sabbath, to giving and receiving hospitality, to playing and living joyfully, and more. Because we believe in continuing testament, that is why we are attentive to God's creative movement in the world today. We listen for God's voice in music, in science, in reason, in vigorous debate. We look for God's presence being revealed in all places and circumstances, sacred or secular, miraculous or ordinary. It's why we listen for God's leading on issues of justice, calling us to be and to bring light to the world. We saw this lived boldly this past year when our UCC military chaplains, led by the Reverend John Gundlach, our Minister for Government and Professional Chaplaincies, provided vocal support for the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. And we see it also in our missionaries. For example, Don and Mary Jane Westra, who were the first of our missionaries to return to Zimbabwe after some time of having none there. They are serving on our behalf at the historic Mount Selinda Mission Hospital and with the child sponsorship program there. And they are serving at the request of the United Church of Christ of Zimbabwe. Because we believe in continuing testament, this is why we prepare leaders who are open to and prepared for ministry in the present and the future church. It's why we support the ministries of global mission interns, faithful young adults like Aaron Wiggins, who is working in Fiji with the Pacific Conference of Churches on justice issues related to global warming and nuclear testing. It's why we invest in internships, in justice and witness ministries in Washington, D.C., in Cleveland, and at Franklinton Center in North Carolina, where present and future leaders can grow in their knowledge of public policy and advocacy. And it's why local church ministries partnered with the Massachusetts Conference to launch the First Call Congregations Project, focusing on exploring the role of those first call churches in sustaining pastoral excellence. And because we believe in continuing testament, we embrace and equip new kinds of churches and new modes of leadership. We see this in places like Southern Asia, where the UCC is assisting fledgling councils of churches in several countries where governments have only recently become open to allowing people to publicly be Christian. And we see it here at home, where the UCC's Parish Life and Leadership Ministry is evaluating and revising our denomination's search and call process with new approaches to streamline the process of matching clergy and church, including searchable databases and revised ministerial profile forms. All of this embodies the way in which listening for God's continuing testament is central to who we are as the United Church of Christ. God is still speaking to and through us.
Perhaps one of the core values that we're all most familiar with is extravagant welcome. When you hear the term extravagant welcome, what do you think? I think of bouncer and ejector ads. I think of readying our churches for the wave of newcomers who first came to our churches because of the God is Still Speaking campaign. I think of getting ready for company, getting out of our comfort zones, and stepping away from our pews to make sure that a visitor feels warmly welcomed. These are appropriate images, I think, but there are more. When I think of extravagant welcome, I think of more than being nice to newcomers. I think of the important work that our church has been engaged in throughout the centuries to welcome the stranger, receive the lost, heal the broken, and include the marginalized. So perhaps extravagant welcome is best summed up this way. Words we all know now, no matter who you are or where you are on life's journey, you are welcome here. And whether you have thought about it this way or not, it is because we believe in extravagant welcome. That is why we insist that God's table is open, not closed. And God's gift and claim in baptism are irrevocable. That too is extravagant welcome. Because we believe in extravagant welcome, we advocate justice for all. That's why we do it. It's why the United Church of Christ helps sponsor annual ecumenical advocacy days each March, and why we hosted a monumental World Council of Churches conference last summer on racism. Because we believe in extravagant welcome, we help congregations to extend hospitality in practical ways. Our Still Speaking ministry led preparatory workshops here in Florida and in other locations to assist congregations who are committed to making the church more welcome. And last November, we held a Still Speaking friend-raising weekend when UCC churches reported welcoming more than 4,000 new first-time visitors on that Sunday alone. Because we believe in extravagant welcome, we teach that evangelism, welcoming others, is mission. And that's why Friday we celebrated new congregations. Because we believe in extravagant welcome, our perspective must be global. Otherwise, it's narrow and therefore exclusive. Because we believe in extravagant welcome, we are a united and a uniting church. In other words, being ecumenical and interfaith is another way of expressing this extravagance. So the second distinctive quality we want to lift up that you are all familiar with is extravagant welcome. Just as Callie has said about continuing testament, it resonates from our God is Still Speaking belief and proclamation. It is part of what makes us distinctive.
When we first set out to talk about and discern our distinctive characteristics as the United Church of Christ, it was tempting to fall back on words that we've known and relied on in the past. Words like justice, mission, evangelism, worship. Good words, very UCC words. But when we started to look through the lens of God is Still Speaking, we began to see the ways that the work of justice and mission and evangelism and worship are not to be compartmentalized, but lived out in concert with all that we do and are. Not segmented, but understood as integral to everything we are about. That's why you heard Callie talking about worship, justice, mission, and evangelism as she was describing continuing testament. It's why you heard Edith using words like global and justice when she was discussing extravagant welcome. And it's why you'll hear me do the same as I introduce the third distinctive characteristic that we'd like you to consider this morning. Changing lives. Or maybe you've heard it expressed this way: never place a period where God has placed a comma. I hope you've had a chance to view some, if not all, of the more than 150 video testimonies that run on the UCC website. More will be added by you during this General Synod. All of these stories are different. Some are testimonies of personal transformation, the I was once lost, but now I'm found genre. Some are stories of the United Church of Christ and its global partnerships and how they have crossed borders and offered healing and hope. Some are stories about UCC justice work that has helped to make another world possible, not just in Washington, D.C., but in places where people find themselves struggling for a sense of place, for daily bread, for community that cares. And they have found that in and through the United Church of Christ. Changing lives. That really is our church's wider mission. And because we are committed to changing lives, we proclaim God's redemptive power in individual lives, in political systems, and in governmental policies at home and around the globe. This is evidenced in the new justice-led curriculum, which is not just a how-to manual, but with justice advocacy at its core. It offers leadership development training for clergy and laity, faith-deepening conversations, and it is leading to new congregational vitality. Our justice work is changing lives, starting with our own, but not ending there. Because we believe in changing lives, we believe that churches must be vital places of worship, of learning, and of service. And we have partnered with the Center for Progressive Renewal for a smorgasbord of face-to-face and online opportunities to help leaders learn how to strengthen existing congregations and grow new ones. As a testament to the life-changing work of the United Church of Christ volunteer ministries, twin brothers Richard and Maxwell Brook, members of Mount Zion UCC in China Grove, North Carolina, traveled to dozens of sites across the United States this past year, documenting the UCC's hand-on ministries and documenting their impact with videos and firsthand accounts on their blog. We believe that lives are changed through global partnerships and experiences. Because we believe in changing lives, we advocate for justice here and around the world. We see this in the Justice and Peace Action Network and the work of so many pastors and congregations in advocacy on the important issues we face as a nation and as a world. And because we believe in changing lives, we preach about the love of Jesus Christ. Christ's passion, Christ's death, and Christ's resurrection. In our worship, in our advocacy, and in our service, it is the love of Jesus and the work of the Holy Spirit that is offering transformation through and among the communities of faith that make up the United Church of Christ. Changing lives, personally, systemically, globally, that's what makes us distinctive.
So who are we? We are the United Church of Christ, where God is still speaking. How are we distinctive? We are distinctive because of our belief in God's continuing testament, extravagant welcome, and changing lives. Individually, each of these values might be aspirational for any faith community, but it is their woven nature that sets us apart as the United Church of Christ. It is a description of who we are that we're hearing has resonance with congregations of all sizes and perspectives. These are the values that bind us together and translate into a shared corporate identity as the UCC. These are values that speak comprehensively to what we're already doing and what we do best. It's our religious DNA. So far in our report to you, we've been discussing how these values have been lived out during the past year through specific events and programming initiatives. But now we want to turn to something that lies ahead for all of us. While we live in our distinctiveness every day in multiple ways, there are some occasions when we have an opportunity to showcase our values to the world in ways that can have big impact. That is why we want to take a moment now to underscore the importance of a major initiative that will take place this coming November. November 1 through November 11, to be exact. It's called Mission 1. Mission 1 was announced earlier this year, and already Congregations and conferences, seminaries, and human service institutions are jumping on the bandwagon, demonstrating how together we can change lives, offer extravagant welcome, and be a witness for God's continuing testament through one major sustained initiative. By design, Mission One is intended to lift and celebrate local mission, but it also pushes us to stretch a bit to connect the dots between compassion and justice, to bring service close to home, but also around the world. It enables us to see the greater impact we can have as a church when we take seriously our oneness together.
On the surface, Mission One is simple. One united church on a shared mission for 11, that's 1-1, powerful days to feed the hungry and to confront food-related injustice. For the first 11 days in November, 11-1, 11-2, 11-11-11, we will collect more than 1 million items of healthy food in our local churches all across the United Church of Christ. That food will remain in our local communities, but individuals and local churches will report their tallies online at ucc.org. Together, then, we can chart our collective progress toward shattering that 1 million goal of healthy food items to share with those who are hungry. But Mission One is not only about collecting and distributing food to hungry people, it is also about connecting service with justice, or as Marilyn Pagan Banks said on Friday night, connecting mercy with justice. We will also, in addition to collecting 1 million food items and distributing them, we will write letters, lots of letters. In fact, more than 11,111 letters to Congress, in collaboration with Bread for the World, calling upon our U.S. government to reform its foreign assistance in a way that more effectively benefits hungry and poor people around the world. So we will be asking you again to send those letters directly to your members of Congress, but we want you to report in on the number of letters that your local church has written. Let us know that so we can count, because we plan on seeing that 11,111 goal surpassed in big ways.
But we're not stopping there. During those same 11 days, we will be fundraising for neighbors in need with the goal of collecting more than $111,111 in online donations to our Neighbors in Need special offering, monies that will be used to support agencies of justice and compassion throughout the United States. We're asking you to support Neighbors in Need in your congregation as usual in October, but we're going to be making a final push online during the first 11 days of November for these hunger-specific ministries. So why not start as soon as you get back home? Set your own goals. You've heard the overarching goals, but what will be your personal and congregational goals? Will your church take responsibility for 1,111 food items? How about 111 letters? Will you give $11 online to Neighbors in Need and commit to finding 11 other persons to do the same? Or maybe you are that one person that God is nudging to give $1 million to Neighbors in Need this year. Imagine what's possible. No matter how you do the math, there are lots of fun, creative combinations we can use with the number 1. but they all start with the participation of every single one of us.
And our National Tote Board will hold us accountable to our goals. And it will be exciting for us to track our progress together in real time, and the whole world will know at the same time we do if we're really delivering on our commitments. We're asking you and your churches to be creative in shedding light on food-related injustice through preaching, public forums, public witness, and educational events. In addition to your food collections, letter writing, and fundraising, we want every church, your church, to focus this 11-day period on hunger-related issues: food policy, food statistics, food delivery, and food safety, and ways in which we perpetuate systemic hunger all over the world, and how it can be prevented. And we hope to gain the attention of news media in hundreds of outlets throughout our country and the world over the actions you will be initiating in your local communities. In short, we want one loud anti-hunger voice to be raised all across the UCC and the world in November.
While the outward expression of Mission 1 is food-focused and hunger-related, there is an inward and spiritual focus as well. And this should not be understated. The motto of the United Church of Christ comes from Jesus' great prayer in the Gospel of John, that they all may be one. If we are successful with Mission 1, and I believe we will be, then we will succeed in surpassing each of the three goals we have set for ourselves and enlist the missional imaginations of our communities and our congregations at the same time. But the real indicator of success will be our demonstration that the church together is more powerful than the church divided. The oneness of our church in reaching and surpassing these goals will determine our success. No single congregation could achieve this large of a goal on its own. But together as the United Church of Christ, we will do so. Mission 1 is meant to be larger than 11 days in November. It's intended to bring us together to publicly proclaim in word and in action our solidarity with those who hunger. It is an invitation to come and see what God is doing in our midst. It is a sign that God is using the church, our church, the United Church of Christ, as a still speaking vehicle and voice for justice. The world needs the distinct values, vision, and voice of the United Church of Christ, continuing testament, extravagant welcome, and changing lives. Mission 1 is a very public opportunity for us to demonstrate this in an incredibly powerful way, that they may all be one. Say it with me, that they may all be one.
I'm passionate about the United Church of Christ. It's important to be a part of a denomination that embraces the leadership of women, that embraces the leadership of persons of color, that embraces the leadership of gay and lesbian persons.
The United Church of Christ has a distinction in that it tends to be either the first or the most vocal or the one that articulates and embodies this distinctiveness in ways that give witness to other denominations, to the wider society.
When we say in the United Church of Christ that God is still speaking, we mean that God's revelation is still taking place today.
If we are listening to a still speaking God, then we can't limit what God might be saying.
God continues to share God's wisdom and thought as long as we're able to listen and be clear and not interrupt.
I love the term extravagant welcome. It's about open arms, open hands. It's even about open minds, I think.
It's our extravagant welcome. It makes us unique. People who have never found a home in the church are finding a spiritual home in the United Church of Christ. It doesn't make us better. It just says that we have dared to offer a welcome to people who have never been able to feel at home in the Church of Jesus Christ.
I think every one of our congregations knows that when someone comes through their doors, it's their responsibility to receive them as a child of God and to welcome them fully and embrace them as God's child.
Matter of fact, I was in the barber shop where I heard a guy say, where is this church? I want to find this church.
I remember the story of the man who said when he first heard or saw the God is Still Speaking commercial, he went to church for the first time in 40 years. That's changing lives.
I guess I'm one of those people who really needs to be engaged in a faith that has muscle, that shapes my life.
We walk in prophetic witness. We speak on those issues of justice. We speak on the issues of compassion.
I believe that people today are ready to hear the message that the United Church of Christ has. In fact, when people hear this message for the first time, they are surprised.
What we have to say, I think, to people, to the world, to the church, is really that there is hope. There is God in our future.
I think the vision that we are trying to portray is a vision of extravagant welcome, of hospitality, of being committed to those who are marginalized. And I think all of that encompasses a vision of who we are as the United Church of Christ.
And now it's your turn. Throughout this synod and in other places, you've been hearing multiple references to these three core values: continuing testament, extravagant welcome, and changing lives. We think this is because they're starting to really take hold in the church. It is a language that resonates with many experiences of who we are. So what I'm going to invite you to do is take some time at your tables right where you are and have some conversation about it. And those of you in the bleachers with folks around you, take some time with those seated with you to talk about it, discuss it. Do these speak to you? Do they say who we are? Are they authentic UCC? Do they sing for you? And then after you talk, you're going to have the chance, if you've got a laptop or a mobile device, we want to receive your instant feedback, either now or, if it's not possible now, in the future, in the days to come, or if it wakes you up in the night and you say, I got to say something. We have a designated website set up, and you can provide feedback, and all you need to do is go to www.ucc.org/values. And you'll find descriptions of what these mean. So talk amongst yourselves. I'll call you back in just a few minutes. speak, and when you get done,
And the mission one, and then the video.
and then Geoffrey comes up. I know that we haven't given you too much time, but I'm going to invite you back. I'm going to invite you back and hope that you will continue your conversations over meals or when you get home or in your local churches. So I'm going to call you back, and so that we can hear from our general minister and president. And I love it when you're talking to each other, but I'm going to call you back. In just a few moments, you're going to hear from our general minister and president. So let's give it up for Geoffrey Black.
Well, I'm very sorry to disappoint you. You don't get a video. Don't worry, it'll come later on in the day, I'm sure. Well, good morning, sisters and brothers. It is a delight to be here with you again. After 2 years in this office, I have some things that I'd like to share with you. This gathering of this church, the General Synod gathering, is one that we extend to each other a warm welcome, and it reminds me of the psalmist's observation of how very good and pleasant it is when sisters and brothers dwell in unity. Like all general synods, this gathering in Tampa is a celebration of unity among people from the east and from the west and from the north and from the south. And like all general synods, it's also a time to express in love and covenant a diversity of opinion and conviction. We've already had some of that today. So thank you, Linda, for this time of conversation, for leading us in a conversation, and thank you to my colleagues on the Collegium for sharing and giving a report to the church about what we've been about. And thank you, everyone here, for listening, participating, talking with each other. I'm also reminded this morning of an observation made by a dear late UCC colleague, Bill Holteen, who led the Office for Church Life and Leadership when I was a staff member nearly 20 years ago. Bill pointed out that the word synod is from the Greek word synodos, which comes from a root that means meeting. Another root also is a part of it that means way or journey. A synod, Bill said, is a meeting on the way. I like that. I like to think that it's a good description of a general synod. The unity we celebrate when we gather is a united and uniting church is not just some kind of doctrinal or cultural uniformity. What we celebrate is journeying toward a unity that has been there ever since Jesus prayed that they all may be one. A oneness that we are sometimes blessed to experience in the here and now, but a oneness that we are always journeying toward together. Journeying on the way. That is what I want to speak with you about this morning, because I am convinced that we are at a key point, a key juncture in the journey that is the United Church of Christ. To me, being together on the journey is important because the journey is about movement, and we've heard talk of movement this weekend already. And we are not a church that is standing still. We are indeed a movement and a church. We are about something important. We are about the business of making a difference in the world as Christ's disciples. For me, that journey began in a special way not long after I was elected to serve as General Minister and President at our last General Synod in 2009. Some of you may recall that when I addressed that synod, one of the themes that I stressed was that we are in this thing together. So one of the first initiatives that I took as GMP was to embark on a listening tour to learn about the UCC in its many and varied settings throughout the nation. I wanted to hear what was on the minds of people who comprise our UCC local churches, conferences, and associations. I wanted to get acquainted with the people of the UCC in their many varied settings in which they live and serve. In all, I have visited 21 of our 38 conferences over the last 21 months, and I intend to keep visiting and keep listening. During my visits, I have heard UCC people, some who are no doubt here in this room today, express their hopes, dreams, and visions for our church and a shared future. The journey has been long, the meetings have been many, but it has been well worth the effort. While I'm on this topic, I want to pause right now and express my deep appreciation to the conference ministers of the United Church of Christ. They have been encouraging, supportive, and helpful to me as I have been on this journey of visitation. They have helped me as I have transitioned from being one of their colleagues in conference ministry to this new ministry as general minister and president. In each conference that I visited, it was the conference minister and his or her colleagues and board chairs that made the arrangements, organized the events, and made sure that I received an extravagant welcome. And to my colleagues in conference ministry, again, I simply say, thank you. This journey helped me to see the United Church of Christ in a new and compelling way. The UCC people that I met were excited about their church, yet they were concerned about our future. They were concerned about young people, especially young adults. They wanted to see us move into a future as a progressive, justice-seeking church, a church following the way of Jesus, grounded in Scripture, empowered by the Holy Spirit, and fully engaged in 21st century mission. The energy and enthusiasm of UCC people helped me to see that our church has vitality that can be carried into a new future if we are careful to be about the hard work of adaptive change in this historic moment. On that journey, I learned that UCC people are ready for change and open to new possibilities. It was not unusual for people to affirm the Still Speaking initiative and ask about it. For many, that initiative signaled a major change in their understanding of who we are as a church and as a still speaking, still listening church. God is now more than ever, there's a willingness to respond to God. Now we are a church with an identity that is clearer and more widely shared than ever before. The prophet Isaiah, in the scripture we heard on the opening day of this synod, speaks the truth for us today, saying, "Do not remember the former things or consider the things of old." I will heed that warning this morning. I will not dwell at length on the long period of history of the United Church of Christ that so many of us know so well, a history that we rightly celebrated 4 years ago in Hartford on the 50th anniversary of this beloved church. Suffice it to say that we know that we stand on a very firm foundation of faithful, courageous, justice-seeking Christian men and women. In that same passage, Isaiah speaks the truth again for us today, that God is about to do a new thing and is already doing a new thing. There will be a way in the wilderness. There will be rivers in the desert. God asked, do you not perceive it? That I believe is our task right now. to perceive this new thing that God is doing, and not just to perceive it, but also to envision it, to describe it, to pursue it together as a church. Now is the time to imagine what's possible, knowing that the possibilities are expansive, full of wonder and life-changing, world-changing possibilities. As we discern this new thing that God is doing, let us also remember that Isaiah says that God's new thing will be done in the midst of a desert. Our desert has been that of mainline decline, loss of members, and financial support that are all too familiar to the United Church of Christ and many of our partners. However, it is important to note that Isaiah's vision of the desert is not one of total desolation. No, it is a vision of a way in the wilderness and rivers in the desert. This is a parched and dry place, yet in it there are elements of hope and possibility. Rivers flowing with refreshing, life-giving water, just as we see before us, water in the midst of our artificial desert. The New Testament letter to the Hebrews assures us that Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever, but nothing in the Bible says that the church must stay the same forever. Our challenge is to tune into the new thing that God is doing, to pursue it together as a church. And this requires more than technical problem solving. That is, fixing or doing better that which we are already doing. What it really requires is that what one consultant has called adaptive change. That is, change that fits the new realities of our day. Realities like population growth and diversification. Realities like shifts in the attitudes about membership and membership organizations. Changes in our economy and the ways that people work and earn a living. Realities like changes in families and family life. Changes in climate. Changes and challenges in the cultures in which we live. And realities like the impact of new technologies on the ways people live life, view life, and communicate with each other. In the end, adaptive change requires a new and expansive vision and ambitious goals. The good news is that the United Church of Christ is beginning to see a way forward, and that we are beginning to see it because we are beginning to work together in new ways, even adaptive ways. We are beginning to imagine what's possible, imagine new possibilities for mission and ministry, and that's what the journey is about today. Today I also want to talk with you about the new things that are already underway in our church. For indeed I believe God is at work in this church. Right here in this room today and tomorrow, the business that we will consider will include two significant proposals about our common life. One on unified governance and one on the frequency of synod. Now, I support both of these because I think they are important changes, and they are, in part, adaptive changes for us. I know that you, too, as delegates, will be considering these changes thoughtfully and prayerfully, and that you will speak and vote your own convictions in truth and love over the next 2 days. While these issues are the focus of our synod, it is important to note that our covenanted ministries and our conferences have been exploring new ways of working together and seeing ourselves as one wider church staff of the United Church of Christ. And again, that is the kind of change that we need to and must make if we are to be the church that moves into the future successfully engaging in mission and ministry. We've learned that it's not enough for us to have a church that is engaged and fully committed, but we need to have a vision for the future. And today I want to talk with you about vision for ministry and mission that will require us to imagine again what is possible. This is about having the mental and spiritual pictures in our minds of what a new and renewed church and wider church setting of the United Church of Christ will look like in the future. Those of us who are now serving in leadership positions throughout the national setting of the United Church of Christ have devoted considerable time and energy in working on charting a way into the future. As you have heard this morning, we've identified core values, and already today you have had an opportunity to consider and engage in dialogue about the meaning of those core values where you serve, where you live. Those still speaking values of continuing testament, extravagant welcome, and changing lives. Closely related to values, though, is purpose. And in order to construct vision, in order to have vision, you have to be clear about your purpose. Let me share the wording of a core UCC purpose that we have discerned thus far. It's not a final draft. This is where we are on the journey of envisioning what our purpose is. And it is simply this: our reason for being is to serve God as made manifest in the gospel of Jesus Christ, and to engage the world in a faith movement that is spiritually grounded, justice-focused, globally minded, and radically inclusive, centered in thoughtful engagement. Based on our core values and purpose, we are now engaged in articulating a vision that includes goals. In the business world, goals that are part of vision are called big, hairy, audacious goals. BHAGs, they call them. But you know how we are in the United Church of Christ. We got a hold of that language and we said, well, it doesn't feel quite right to us. They need to be big, holy, audacious goals. Then we can live with them. But in the end, they're still BHAGs. And let me emphasize that these BHAGs are only a part of what an organization or a church's vision should include. Goals, though, are about intentionality. And I always like to remind myself that we tend to do that which we intend to do. To have goals is to have a clear intention. So these goals that I want to share with you today are about our intentionality, about what we will be, what we will become. I'm going to share with you 5 goals, and they are, again, in draft form. We're still working on them. We're working on perfecting them. We may end up with more or less in the end in terms of the goals that we set out for the United Church of Christ moving forward. Believe me, you will hear more about that. You will be engaged in more conversation about it. But here's where we are now. Our first goal is to be a growing church and a growing movement that is theologically and spiritually conversant with our own and other faith traditions. To get beyond numbers of members and dollars in the plate as measurements of growth and vitality, to understand growth as spiritual, missional, and about our capacity to serve God's people and God's creation. That's goal number 1, to be a growing church and a growing movement. Goal number 2 is to be widely recognized, a widely recognized witness to the gospel, a witness for justice, a witness for peace, a witness for equality and inclusivity in the public square. We will redefine the profile of the United Church of Christ and who we are as disciples of Jesus, and we will do this unapologetically, unashamedly, and without fear. A third goal will be that we will be a catalyst for excellence in leadership in every setting of ministry, and our wider church setting will be a catalyst for excellence in ministry and in congregational life. A fourth goal is that we will make environmental stewardship central to our understanding of practice of Christian faith. Let me say that again. We will make environmental stewardship central to our understanding and practice of Christian faith and become widely known as a U.S. faith-based leader in the preservation and stewardship of God's creation. And finally, we will become a church that is relevant and reflective of the age and racial ethnic demographics of this nation. And we will do what is necessary to have leadership and meaningful relationships that are consistent with this goal. This is a glimpse of what we are doing. We are working on these big, holy, audacious goals, and we will keep you informed and involved and seek your input as we do this. These goals will set the stage for the more practical work of strategic planning, because we need to take our goals and turn them into plans that are measurable and that we can be held accountable to you for. Well, we've come to the point that we need to realize that this is a critical moment in the life of the United Church of Christ, and there are things that we can be about in this moment, right now. Now is the time for us to get moving and to really take on being engaged in making this the church that God has called it to be. There's no reason to wait. Now's the time for all of us and each of us to perceive the new thing that God is doing. Now is the time to imagine what is possible and to act on it. Let me suggest 3 things that you and we can do right now on the way to being the church that God is calling us to be. Number 1 is an easy one. We can get behind mission 1. We can take it seriously and we can take it home. We can take it into our lives and into our communities. Tell our neighbors about it, tell our friends about it, enlist their support. We can get behind it, and if we are successful, and I know we will be, we will surely change lives. Secondly, you can become an ambassador for OCWM. You heard the treasurer's report this morning. You know what that's about. We need to build OCWM as we develop more and diverse ways for people to give and support the church. So you can become an ambassador again for OCWM. You can go home and advocate in your local church and wherever you are in church life for people to become more and more generous in supporting the mission of the wider church. Finally, I have a little project that is important to me that I'd like to share with you as something that you can do right now. You can go back to your local church and you can invite conversation and perhaps action on becoming a partner church with another congregation that is very different than your own. Establish a partnership with a different kind of church. It's one way that we might begin to work on our big, holy, audacious goal of being engaged with others and becoming more compatible with the demographics of our nation. We saw the results of this kind of partnership just on Saturday when we had a concert by the United Voices of Praise. Let me tell you a little bit about that choir that gave a concert on Saturday. They are the joint effort of a predominantly Euro-American UCC church in North Carolina and an African-American holiness church in North Carolina. Those 2 churches have been together in partnership for over 15 years. They have traveled not only this country together, but they have traveled globally together, praising God and bringing an offering of song wherever they go. They told me a story about how they bonded as people and how they became one choir. And how it happened was that they were traveling in the south of France and their bus broke down. It was late in the day and they knew that they would have to stay overnight someplace in order to wait for the bus to be prepared. However, there was no place for them to stay. And then finally, the Communist Party came up with a barracks where they could spend the night. They said they lost all of their sense of privacy in that moment. They had to bond, and they had to find a way to spend the night together in this barracks that had little privacy. They made that bonding, and they became closer together. Their relationships grew, and those churches are now seeing themselves as united in a very, very special way. I'm suggesting to you that as we build relationship among churches and across the lines that divide us, across the lines of race or gender or inclusivity, we will find a way to become a very, very different church, a transformed church, a church of changed lives. Well, that's one suggestion, and I think we can build on that suggestion and make a difference. We know that adaptive change and achieving big, holy, audacious goals is hard work, but they are not alien to our tradition. I want you to keep thinking about adaptive change and BHAGs. I want you to imagine what's possible and know that change must happen if we are to lead the United Church of Christ into a meaningful and vital future, and it all begins with us. Tonight in worship, in music and image, in word and movement, we will experience a big vision, the Magnificat, Mary's famous song from the first chapter of Luke. Jesus leaps in her womb, and the young woman, pregnant, unmarried, mother of God, proclaims, "My soul magnifies the Lord, and my spirit rejoices in God my Savior. For the Mighty One has done great things. God has scattered the proud in the thoughts of their hearts, brought down the powerful from their thrones, and lifted up the lowly. God has filled the hungry with good things and sent the rich away empty." Talk about big, holy, audacious goals. God is doing a new thing. Mary could perceive it. She knew that her time has come. Now is the time for us to perceive a new thing and perceive it in our day and in our time. Now is the time for us to live and act like the church we know the world needs. Now's the time to be the church that God has already imagined and dreamed of. Take courage now. Have no fear. Imagine what is possible. Set big goals, sisters and brothers, but don't hesitate to act. Now is the time. Amen and amen.